So I want to officially welcome Alvaro to our September teleseminar. And I wanted to, for all our attendees, I wanted to introduce our guest. Alvaro Fernandez is originally from Spain. He's a brilliant leader who has perhaps done as much as anyone in the last few years to help people become aware of the importance of taking care of their brain health and how to do it. He has an MBA and MA in education from Stanford and is the CEO of sharpbrains.com, a leading market research and think tank tracking health and well-being applications of neuroscience. He's also the author of the recent best-selling book called The Sharp Brains Guide to Brain Fitness, which was also named a best book by AARP. Alvaro works closely with the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation, and we're thrilled to have him on this teleseminar today. So welcome, Alvaro. And I heard I'm just going to interrupt 1 second. I heard one person joined. If you could please mute yourself by pressing *6, that will improve the quality of the recording. We would appreciate it. Thank you. And so, Alvaro, do you have anything specific that you want to address with us from the beginning today, or I
Sure.
have some interesting questions for you?
No, thank you very much for the very kind and warm introduction. It is great to be able to meet many people in your community through this call. Maybe I would like to start just with providing a bit of context of why we do what we do, and then we can be much more specific, because I think the context itself is very revealing and very interesting. So my own background is in economics and in education. I came to be interested in the brain through education because I realized what is the organ that learns. It's, of course, the brain. So when I was in Stanford taking many education and psychology classes, I came across more and more findings around how the brain works and what we know today that we didn't know 20, 30 years ago. And I came across two new concepts, two new fields of research that made me stop and realize if these things are true, many things in society have to change, from the way we educate our children, the way we stay productive and healthy and happy in our workplaces, the way we stay independent and vital for more and more and more decades of life. Because good news is today life expectancy in the US is close to 80, which was not the case only 50 years ago. So there's been many things that have changed in society, and through new brain science, I thought, well, maybe it's an opportunity to contribute to better quality of life and better, just lives in general. So what were those two key areas of research that really made me think, hey, this is something meaningful? One is what is called neuroplasticity, how flexible the brain remains through our whole lives. And that is new, in that until only 20 years ago, most scientists would have said after age 18 or 20-something, the brain was in automatic decline, fixed
That's
or
true.
in decline.
I heard it too.
Exactly, and there was nothing we could do. So that now opens a new opportunity. If the brain remains flexible, how can we drive that flexibility in a good direction, not in a bad direction? And then the other concept is what is called cognitive reserve, which means the more thoughtful, mindful, stimulating lives we lead, in a sense we are saving in a brain account that will help us delay Alzheimer's, delay cognitive problems, and given that we live longer lives, that also was very important. So just to summarize, I thought if this is true, there needs to be an independent resource that tracks what is new and how to apply it, either for professionals or for just individuals, for consumers. And then we created Sharp Brains And we do many things, including a conference in a couple of weeks that Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation is one of the main sponsors. So thank you for that. But we also saw a big need for a book and for good resources that are accessible for everyone who wants to understand what is new science and how to apply it. And that's why we published the book you just mentioned, The Sarbrain's Guide to Brain Fitness. So that's a bit of the context where I'm coming from.
That's great. That's great. Would you like to tell us what chartbrains.com does?
Yeah. So the website, in a sense, is the central place where we share what we are observing and what we are doing. So if we see a new piece of research that is very meaningful, then we will publish a brief article to describe the new science, but more importantly, we link to the actual science because we want more and more people to access and understand the real science, what it means, what it doesn't mean, because often we find the media doesn't always do a very good job of explaining the meaning of new science. Then we also produce conferences. We have many brain teasers, so people who just want to access some interesting activities can also access them through sarbrains.com. But in a sense, because we have a very large network of scientists and collaborators worldwide, so we do not have a physical location. We are physically located between San Francisco, California, and Washington, D.C., but sarbrains.com, in a sense, is our window to the world where people worldwide who are interested in this new science and how to apply it can just access that through the website.
Yes, that's good. That's very helpful, and I think it's a very, very needed service to our large community.
Yeah, no, and in this case, the interest is truly worldwide. So that is very important to have a resource that is available everywhere. And we learn, I mean, the main battle here, or the bottleneck, is language. So now, right now, everything is in English, but we are now preparing a Spanish version of the book and also of the website in a couple of months. So that will also be available. And given I'm from Spain, obviously that's very important for me personally. And I know there's many Latinos in the US. So hopefully we'll have a great resource both in English and in Spanish. And then, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to add more and more languages.
That's wonderful. We should do it in Italian.
Well, are you very busy the next few months?
So my next question was, I know you've touched on this, but if you could address, I've been reading your book and because it's very interesting and I really like it, but also to prepare for this teleseminar. And I saw this graph that talks why brain fitness matters. In a way, human beings have always had a brain, but it seems that in the last few years, we've really seen this much more interest, much more attention on brain fitness. So why does it matter today?
Yeah, I think there's two main reasons for that. One is, the most clear one is we live longer lives. So if we died when we were 50, we could probably just ignore our brains because the brain are hardwired, in a sense, to evolve in some ways. By the age we are 50, we tend to be pretty functional and fine. So what's the big deal? But now we live 80, 90, 100, 110. So, and the brain tends to decline slowly when we start to be like in our early 40s. So the decline is pretty gradual, but decade after decade becomes pretty clear. So now we live longer lives. We need to be more conscious, more mindful, more proactive about how to protect that main asset, our human brain, that enables us to do everything else that we love doing in life. So we invest a lot of money in our bank accounts, in our financial retirement. We don't spend enough time thinking about the long term. How do we invest and protect our brains? The other reason is that the world itself is becoming more complex, is changing quickly. We get new technologies all the time, new companies, new industries. That is very stressful, and it requires a different response that it would have required of our great grandparents who were exposed to a more stable environment. So, because we live longer lives and because our environment is changing very, very quickly, those two factors put a lot of more pressure, more difficulty on our brains, and that's why we have to start thinking about, well, how do we maximize that resource? How do we protect it? In the same way that I mentioned, we invest in our financial savings accounts, or the way we invest in our house or in a car. We know how to invest in the future. We just have to realize that our brain is as important as all these other assets, or even than our bodies. I mean, over the last 50 years, you know that there's been a huge physical fitness awareness, and now everyone knows the importance of being physically fit. There is health clubs, there's personal trainers. That's only starting to happen with the brain.
That's true. That's true. Well, I was just going to. I want to backtrack for 1 second because I wanted to ask you this question. At what age should we start thinking about brain health and fitness?
Maybe when we are 7 and start having independent thoughts. No, but seriously. But I mean, they're very early, and I will give you a couple of examples. So the real answer is as early as possible. And often we ignore the brain because we don't see it, right? It's right in there in our head somewhere, but we don't see it in our mirror, so we just ignore it. So I'm not saying we have to become neuroscientists or we have to understand exactly how the amygdala looks like or the hippocampus. That's not important. What is important is how the brain works and how can we make it work better. And let me just give you a couple of examples that I've been surprised by very young children. So I have a 5-year-old daughter, and a couple of years ago, we were with a neighbor who was a bit older, but he maybe was like 5 or 6, and my daughter was becoming very, very stressed about something, and then the neighbor told her, hey, why don't you slow breathing, because that will calm you down, and that's what I do. So just that moment was magic, and that 6-year-old boy was self-aware that through breathing, you can regulate your emotions and your stress, and he felt he could share that with my daughter. So he was not a neuroscientist, but he knew how the mind works and how to regulate this. So being 6, you can benefit from this, or you can be older. But in general, I think everyone should become more aware of how our brains and mind work, because that would make us more happier, healthier, and more adapted and likely to succeed in whatever environment we happen to be in, either a school or a company or a foundation or being retired. So our emphasis with even calling the book The Sarbanes Guide to Brain Fitness, we want to help popularize the concept of brain fitness. This is for everyone. This is not about you have to wait until you are 60 and are concerned about Alzheimer's. The opportunity starts much, much earlier, of course, with different priorities. Maybe earlier in life is more about the right level of overall stimulation and challenge, how to deal with stress later in life. So the priorities change, but the message that the brain is important, we have to learn how it works so we can make it work better and maintain it and protect it for the long term. Our objective would be for everyone, regardless of age, to be more alert to that message.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. It reminds me of this quote from your book that I really like. It says, "Understanding the brain to better monitor its health."
Yeah, exactly. Because if we don't, and that's the complexity with the brain. And with the brain, the problem is that we don't have very good assessments of how it is working. That is going to change, by the way, in only a few years. But right now, we don't have a good objective assessment that says, this is how my brain is working right now. And then we can compare it 1 year from now, 5 years from now. So we see what improves, what doesn't improve, and then what to do based on that. So we need to be more educated and more aware of how our brains work so we can understand where our weaknesses and where our opportunities to improve may be. And the big problem with, I mean, I have nothing against the media. They have covered us very nicely. I like overall the work they do. But the media has to oversimplify things. When they cover a new scientific finding, they have to think what is relevant for everyone in the universe, for the average person. And the reality is a bit more nuanced. Is some things can work extremely well for some people, some for other people. It is very different if you are working in a very, very stressful environment and you have 3 different jobs at the same time and are struggling a very complex family life, from if you are retired and just looking for new things to do, or if you are a kid with ADHD or dyslexia. So one big trend, one big need we see is more for personalized advice, for people to understand what are the big options out there that can improve brain health and how to navigate them and how to identify maybe which one is more relevant and interesting for me, because I am different from my neighbor. And that's why we thought a book was the right format to first explain what is new, what are new options to improve brain health, and how in the end, in the last chapters, how people can integrate those different options into what their own priorities may be.
Yeah, that makes sense. You were starting to talk about this topic, and I'm sure a lot of other listeners here have seen AARP's bulletin this month that just came out, and on the front cover there's a big article, a big writing heading that says the number one way to keep your brain healthy. And so you have it also in your book, of course, and that is physical exercise, just like we were talking about, physical exercise. So obviously you agree with this.
Yeah, I agree and also disagree. So let's see. So I think a way to explain the new science is through the life of a neuron. So what we know today that we didn't know 10 years ago is that every single day of our lives, no matter our age, between 2 to 10,000 neurons are being born in our brains every single day. So one day, that's not a big deal. But if you think 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, I mean, that's a lot of new neurons. So what is interesting is that there's some things we can do that even can increase that rate of what is called neurogenesis, of creation of new neurons. And the main one is precisely physical exercise, mostly aerobic exercise. So it has to feel like an effort. It has to be fast walking or some sport, but that can increase the creation of new neurons. So it is extremely important for anyone who has a sedentary life to move to, at the very least, a minimum of 2 hours of aerobic exercise per week. And that can be accomplished in many different ways. So moving from less than 2 hours to at least a minimum of 2 hours is a top priority. But for example, if someone is already doing 10 hours of aerobic exercise per week, it's not very clear that's going to be the opportunity for that person versus other priorities. So let me continue with the life of the neuron. So the neuron is born. Now, it is mental exercise, the one that influences where that new neuron goes and how long it survives. So the use it or lose it really applies at that neuron level. If a neuron is born, but you are not thinking, you are only watching TV for hours, for days, then that neuron will serve no purpose and then will die. So then what is the point of physical exercise? Nothing, because you have a new neuron, but it died. So that's a loss, that's a waste of energy. So you need, it's a combination. You need the physical and the mental exercise, because the more, this is saying that is cells that fire together, wire together. So the more you engage in specific thoughts or feelings or behaviors or actions, you are exercising more and more of the same neuronal networks in your brain. And just by exercising those networks more often, they are getting stronger. There is a process, they build something called myelin around the neurons that make those networks much more efficient. So mental exercise is as important as physical exercise. And then on the other side of the coin is stress, because a bit of stress is not bad, can make us feel alert, pay attention, a bit more motivated for the challenge, but too much stress, and in our society, many people have anxiety, have depression, so too much stress can actually either prevent the birth of new neurons or even contribute to the death of existing neurons. So learning how to regulate stress, which in our society, again, either we live in Tibet and, well, even there, people have stress for other reasons, or we live in our society, which is stressful. So we have to learn how to deal with stress. And that's as important as mental exercise and as physical exercise. So there's other factors, other things we can discuss, but only we start there with understanding the really complementary role of physical exercise, mental exercise, and stress management. That would be a wonderful foundation to build on that the media often is not explaining. And I have not read that AARP article, but I will suspect it also fails in the same oversimplistic advice, forgetting, again, that the brain is a system, that you have to take all these matters into account, and there is no one magic pill. There's not one general solution, whether be it physical exercise or a supplement or any kind of drug that is going to solve all our problems. It's a more complex organism and more complex opportunity than that.
Well, that's absolutely true, and we're, here at the foundation, we're in total agreement to this. But with you, but it's really good to hear it articulated in different words, and yeah.
May I ask? No. In fact, one of when we were starting to do research for the book and for everything we did, and this was in 2007. One of the first books we came across that we really liked was Brain Longevity by Dr. Dharma, and that's how we came across your work as well. And we thought, wow, this is clearly going in the same direction. So that was pretty interesting. Again, obviously you have been in this world for longer than I have, and we have, but clearly we're approaching this for extremely complementary angles.
Yes, exactly. Well, would you like to address the diet and nutrition aspect of brain health and fitness, since we have some people that are very interested in this topic?
Yeah. Let me address two things maybe that people mentioned in the first few minutes before the official call started.
Yes,
because
course.
There were two things. So one was nutrition and diet. The other was memory issues, just in general. So let me start with the memory issues, and then let's go to the nutrition and diet. Because I think even in this area, what is very interesting, and in a sense, what we have been doing for the last few years is to educate. And my background, a lot is education, so it's been a challenge to think, hey, how do we educate people to empower them without overwhelming them, right? Because too much information can be confusing, can be counterproductive. So in terms of memory, what is very interesting is that to understand how to improve memory, we have to understand that the brain does many more things than memory. And for example, if we don't have good attention, good concentration ability, we cannot remember. Not because memory is bad, but because we didn't process the information the first time. And also, if we have high levels of stress and anxiety, that itself lowers our ability to concentrate and to remember. So for many people, the best way to improve memory, it is to learn how to regulate emotions and stress. And that's why some of the research that your foundation has been sponsoring around meditation and breathing makes so much sense. And sometimes can sound counterintuitive, like, hey, I want to improve memory. Why are you telling me to focus on breathing and stress? Well, because again, the brain is linked. So even if the outcome for many people is, I want to improve memory, there are other parts of the equation, such as attention and regulating stress, that can be the best place to start. And back to now, nutrition and supplements. So the way we presented the book is, well, first of all, we talk about the brain itself and the mind, how they work, so we are better equipped to manage ourselves. And then we go quickly into, well, what are the pillars, the fundamental aspects of a brain healthy lifestyle? And there are 5. 3 I already mentioned in physical exercise, mental exercise, stress management. In the book, obviously, we go into much more depth into all these and more specific guidelines. But then what are the other 2 of the 5? The other 2, one is nutrition, and the other one is socialization. So in nutrition, there's been a lot of controversies. So over the last 10, 20 years. So right this second, what seems pretty clear is that nutrition overall is a very important pillar, and that what is good for our body is good and very important for our brain. And why is that the case? The brain is small. It's maybe only 2% or 3% of our body weight, yet it consumes 20 to 30% of the whole body oxygen and many nutrients, which is why nutrition has to supply always that flow of energy for the brain to operate. So nutrition has a very important role. Now, what specific guidelines can we talk about in terms of nutrition? So the Mediterranean diet, and that would be good news for you, Kirti, because I think you're originally from Italy, is the one that has been more shown to have clear benefits long term. So it is what people already know about the value of fruit, vegetables, omega-3. But for example, what matters is to get all these ingredients through the diet. And this may be controversial, but supplements in general today, I would say that you have to have a very specific reason why you take a specific supplement. Otherwise, if you don't have a specific deficiency in one supplement, it's better to think about the whole nutrition. How can you replicate the Mediterranean diet? How can you eat more blue fish? How can you get more omega-3 through the diet and nutrition itself? Because that's where the actual clinical trials have shown long-term that the value is, and then supplements are useful to cover for specific deficiencies. Can be vitamin D, can be something else. But in the US, sometimes what I feel, and what the science shows is most people take too many supplements without knowing why. and they can have side effects and not even help people. So I would say, in terms of nutrition, pay a lot of attention to nutrition and the Mediterranean diet and how to implement that in your lives, and then consult with a doctor or a professional about specific deficiencies, and then go to the supplement. So that would be my overall high-level advice. In terms of what to avoid, we say in the book, the main thing to avoid is processed foods and high sugar foods. And the reason is because glucose is very important for the brain to operate. So glucose is like the oil for the engine of the brain. But high, very processed foods, they send the glucose to the brain too quickly. So in a sense, you get a high of glucose, but then it creates a withdrawal effect. You get tired very quickly. So it creates a very volatile mental state versus more natural foods. They release the glucose to the brain in a more constant rate. That is exactly what you want, because you want to have good performance and health through the whole day, not just in mountains and valleys. So it's important to think about that. And something similar happens with coffee, for example. And often people don't realize that. I happen to drink, I like coffee, also being from Spain originally. So one important tip is drinking too much coffee at the same time doesn't make any sense. It makes sense more to dose that slowly through the whole day. Because again, the brain is not going to get all of it at the same time, or you will get a bit high, and then it will be worse, a crash in half an hour, 1 hour. Makes sense to get little doses throughout the day. So anyway, so those are just some overall guidelines. I cannot go into much more specifics when we talk about nutrition. Then the other key pillar was socialization, because often we don't think how meeting other people is part of our mental exercise regime, because just paying attention to what they say, trying to understand where they are coming from, trying to be constructive into how to problem solve something that is a problem, how to solve it, can be, for example, volunteering. There is a good recent research on how volunteering can be very beneficial for the brain at all ages, because, I mean, it's something meaningful. You have to walk there, so it's physical exercise. You have to also think how to help, so that's mental exercise. Or often you also have to deal with stress, so it's stress management. So socialization through activities that are meaningful, that are linked to some problem, how to solve it, they are very beneficial. And let me just end this overall kind of summary by saying, but also what is very new, that often the media doesn't still cover very well, or they cover in the very superficial ways, is the whole world of brain training. Like if we said earlier, the brains remain flexible throughout life. Well, can we train them in ways that make them evolve in better ways than just watching TV 5 hours a day for the next 30 years? And the answer is yes, there's a way to train our brains. And then we cover 4 main methodologies that have good grounding in science, from meditation to cognitive training to stress management through biofeedback and cognitive behavioral therapy. But for people to understand that that's like going to a health club. Instead of exercising our bodies, now we can also exercise our brains and our minds, and that's what I like. And in fact, we had an interview with Andrew Newberg, who has been doing some research with you and with Dr. Dharma. But that's where we see a lot of promise right now. That's the next frontier. How do we really exercise those neurons and those systems to increase our capacity as much as we can, so that not only we are more functional today, but also we have a better performance, better results, better health 20, 30 years from now. And that's where the frontier is science is right now.
That's incredibly fascinating. That's very, very fascinating. I have another fairly important question that I'd like to ask, and then I'll open it up to the audience here. It's more than a question; it's like a statement following some of the things that you said, and it's on page 48 of your great book. You have a little chart, and it talks about the partial results from your 2010 Sharp Brains market survey. And
Yep.
I was really very, very surprised to read the top 3 important brain functions for a thriving personality, personally and professionally, that people responded that they named these 3 top abilities, functions. The first one being ability to manage stressful situations. Number 2, concentration power to avoid distractions. And 3, being able to recognize and manage one's emotions. That by themselves, somebody could say, well, this is really not about the brain. It's not really about your memory. Which is basically misinformation, because it does certainly affect your brain and your memory and of course your health. And so, were you surprised when you saw these results?
Yeah, we were, and especially because of all that. Yeah, we were surprised, and in fact, you didn't say, but number 10. So in that same list, we have 10 ranked from more important to less important. And
Yes.
do you remember which one number 10 was? Remembering faces and names.
Yes,
which is where
exactly.
everyone, it's a nice joke, right? Hey, I don't remember your name, but we know, hey, that doesn't interfere with my ability to be happy, to be productive, to have a nice job, a nice family, nice friends. Instead, people really measured. So those 3, in fact, we ran the survey precisely because when we were talking to people, we realized what people told us was very different from what scientists often were studying, because scientists often they prefer to study people with a lot of problems, because when you study people who have a lot of problems, it's easy to show some improvement, and obviously as a scientist you want to show some improvement. So they tend to study people who are in their 80s, 90s, they have already significant areas of cognitive impairment, and then they tend to neglect, okay, well, what happens decades before? So this was a study, the survey you just referred to, we did it for all ages, from age 10 to age 90, of healthy individuals. And what was very interesting is that with very few exceptions, those results you just mentioned were very consistent decade after decade. So 2 of the 3 deal with more emotional, stress-related factors that in the brain would correlate what is called the limbic system, which is where emotions are triggered, and that's part of the brain system. That's why I say, hey, we have to understand that the brain is a whole system if we really want how to improve it. And the other one, the concentration power, is more in the cortex, is more in the prefrontal cortex. So people understand the value, but often people don't think about the brain, because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. Like, for example, the myth that the left brain is analytical, the right brain is creative. Well, that's science fiction. That's not how it works. The way to really think of the brain as a system is to think of the importance of those 3 elements I mentioned earlier: memory, attention, and stress. And that's why when you ask people, hey, what would you want to really improve on, they say 2 of the 3 top things were about how to regulate stress, how to regulate emotions. So yes, we were very surprised when we saw those results, but I think they really reflect what people really care and think when they are given the option to just step back for a second and understand what is going on and what they want to improve on.
Yes, yes. Well, and
Here, Kitty.
hello? Hello? Hello?
That wasn't me. I think someone was maybe just say their name. So maybe whenever you are ready for questions from people, I think they were trying to ask a question. Maybe.
Yes, we will. I just wanted to finish this topic because to us it's particularly interesting to see that because, as you know, we are sponsoring significant research on the brain, and a lot of our attention is focused on meditation and a yoga meditation exercise, and so which has the specific effect of also managing your stress and managing your emotion and improving your concentration. So it was very, very striking what I read. So
let me just very brief point. But in fact, when you think out the three elements I mentioned, the stress, attention, and
memory,
you got more memory. I mean, there's other things, but those are three engines. Yeah, clearly, meditation is very clearly working on at least two of the three, which is why they can result in the other one, right? So that's the beauty of it.
Yes, right. I imagine that people have questions. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself by pressing *7 and ask your question, and then please mute yourself again so we avoid having so many people. But yes, Alvaro is ready.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Mary from Kansas. What is your take on coconut oil and the medium chain triglycerides to improve your ketones?
So the way I think to answer that question is by providing some context, because what I see often happens is that people get super enthused with one intervention because of one or two very promising studies. Those studies often are refuted only a few years later, or they don't have long-term analysis. So what I see people is that they get often too much enthused with specific things like coconut oil and don't see the forest. So what is the forest? So in 2010, the NIH conducted the most comprehensive review of everything in the universe you could imagine that can improve cognition, can improve brain health. And that was not in any way influenced or sponsored by pharma. It was actually just the NIH thinking from a public health perspective, how can we improve the brain health of our aging population? So they reviewed everything, invasive, non-invasive, all the drugs, all the supplements, physical exercise, anything you can imagine, objectively, and trying to find, okay, what has a clear impact. So there were two things, two takeaways from that review. One was that we cannot prevent the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, but we can delay the symptoms. And that's important to better manage expectations of what is possible and what is not possible. And second, it identified some factors that either increased the probability of developing Alzheimer's or cognitive impairment or not. So the key factors that increase the probability of Alzheimer's disease and cognitive problems were two. One was depression, and two was diabetes. So that's why we were talking about the stress and emotions and physical exercise and nutrition, because they help manage those two risk factors. Then the three factors that reduce the risk of Alzheimer's and cognitive impairment were the Mediterranean diet, physical exercise, and cognitive exercise. So coconut oil didn't appear there. And I mentioned all this long story to contextualize better things. Because I've been asked this question several times, but people who are very, very enthused, and I don't obviously understand, I don't know where you are coming from, but I have to step back and say, well, we don't know. The real answer is we don't know. There is not enough actual science to tell you this is a priority. There is actual science saying we have to pay much, much more attention to these other factors I just mentioned. So if you already do everything else perfectly well, then maybe you can experiment with something else like coconut oil and see if that works for you. But if not, I would say start with all the other factors that have more clear evidence behind before you place too many hopes on that one.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh.
I think I recognize that voice.
Yeah. Hello, this is Dr. Dharma and Alvaro. Thank you so much for being on this teleseminar today. It's really been enlightening, and I appreciate your time and being here with us. My question revolves around also a very specific point that I think, as you mentioned, the frontier of neuroscience on how we can get our neurons to keep firing accurately and all that. And I've recently been investigating something that also has been coming to the forefront. I think it's on the leading edge of research, and you have it in your book, in the concept of psychological well-being, which is now emerging into the idea of spiritual well-being. For example, one aspect of psychological well-being or spiritual well-being, that of having a knowing or having a purpose or a mission in life, has been shown actually to decrease the incidence of Alzheimer's. And I'm just wondering what your thought is about a person developing that aspect of their being, that spiritual aspect.
So this, I think, maybe two aspects of the question. One was spiritual per se. The other one is having a purpose. So maybe I will start with, and they're linked, right? But let me talk to a purpose, maybe because that's more easy, more secular, more easy to break down. So, for example, I'm not the only author of our book. We have two other co-authors. One is a quite known neuroscientist. His name is Elhonon Goldberg. But when I asked him, what is the best thing I could be doing for my own brain? He says, well, exactly what I am doing, which is to create a new organization that has the purpose of always learning what is the latest and teaching other people. So the purpose is extremely important because it brings the right motivation to then adopt all the other lifestyle habits that we have been talking are so important. So having a clear, meaningful purpose is not easy to analyze in a clinical trial, but I think everyone can understand, and we discuss it in the book, how it can be a unifying, like a rallying factor to make us have the right friends, the right colleagues, the right social environments that help us adopt the more active, physical, fulfilling lives that in the end is one of the main aspects that help our brains. So the spiritual aspect of things, what is pretty fascinating, and by the way, in my background, I am Catholic. I'm married to a Jewish woman. So we have to think a lot about our values and what are our common interests and missions and goals in life. And there are many things across religions that reflect a very similar intent, which is how to become better human beings. So many spiritual practices have already incorporated some of these values. We just have to look under the surface. And in fact, the interview in the book with Andrew Newberg was pretty fascinating about these points. About, well, it's not about being religious, follow this religion or that other religion. It's about how to find meaning in ourselves, in our lives, in our work. You can do that in different ways of being spiritual. And also, the practice of either meditation or deep prayer, which is pretty common in many religious spiritual practices, is now, over the last only 5-10 years, coming to the forefront as a great way to physically shape our brain, to train our brains, as I said before, to better regulate our stress, to better build our attention, to better run that asset we have. So it is pretty interesting that, in a sense, many super scientific, hardcore studies are coming to converge with some of the spiritual practices that have been going on for the last thousands of years. And then the opportunity right now is, well, how to democratize, how to make those techniques available to as many people as possible, and how to use them and when. Because some types of meditation are different from others. So which one makes more sense for whom? So that's a bit of the frontier right now.
Very well put. Again, I want to thank you for being on our program today. I hear a lot of background noise. I'm just wondering if another person has a question.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
This is George Pro in Seattle.
Hi, George. Hey, just 1 second. I'm sorry. If someone has a lot of background noise, could you please mute your line? It's at the end of the call, but still would help us all. Press *6, please. We hear a lot of dishes in the background.
Television noise or something.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
So
okay,
that's the
please,
best thing
George.
for your brain. Switch off television. That's the starting point.
Yeah.
Please, George, go ahead.
Yes. My question is about this online program called Lumosity. Do you know anything about that? It's a series of exercises that's supposed to sharpen the brain.
Yeah, no, I know them. That very well. One of the chapters of the book, in fact, we review most of the popular brain training websites and softwares to see what's the science behind them and also what's the satisfaction rate. So people who actually use them, do they see the benefits they expect or not? So the starting way to answer your question is, well, first of all, what are the expectations you have? So the problem with some of these programs is that people expect too much, often misled by the marketing. So if you expect doing that is going to prevent Alzheimer's, I would say you're going to be disappointed. Mm-hmm. Having said that, if you expect doing this is probably better than just doing one more crossword puzzle after you have done 1 million of them, then I think that is correct because it's designed in a very clever way and they have good science behind to make a variety of activities, exercise, different parts, different networks of the brain. So it can be a very efficient workout. Again, it's not the magic solution for everything, but yes, we think that is part of the overall equation of factors that can help us. So that specific program you mentioned is one that, in fact, in the book, in the survey we ran, people have high satisfaction rates, and that's also important, right? Because one thing is the science, the other is, well, people actually do these things and like them, but there were other programs where people saw even higher results, and often some programs that were a bit more specific. So Lumosity is more general. It exercises many things. Other programs, there's another program often common in the media, they have a lot of support in PBS, is by Posit Science. So that is more narrow for what is called information processing, either visual or auditory, how quickly you can process new information. And that other program seems to be better for that than Lumosity. So in the book, we covered a few of these programs, trying to help people understand, well, which one sounds to address what I seem to be more interested in. So just to summarize, it makes sense compared to the common alternatives like crossword puzzles people do, as long as we don't think it's going to prevent Alzheimer's, or as long as we don't think is either that or physical exercise, or meditation, or the other elements that we have discussed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
I have a question. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
We're past 6 o'clock. Alvaro, are you all right continuing for a few more minutes?
Yes, I have 5 more minutes.
Okay, please go ahead. You can say your name.
Yes, I'm Judith Weber, and I'm enjoying the meditation CD, Satanama, and I thank the Alzheimer Institute for providing that. My question is about working memory. I have ADHD, and I'm led in my readings, many of them are readings provided by you folks, that working memory can be benefited by some of these programs that you were just speaking of. And I'm having a hard time sorting out which of them would be best focused on working memory.
So that's a great question. And even before we talk about training, and I can tell you a couple of names right now, but before, again, the role of working memory is extremely important. And it's great that you realize that, right? But most people don't realize how working memory, if I tell you right now, everyone in the call, to remember, I gave you the 7 digits of my telephone number and asked you to remember it and say it backwards, that's exercising your working memory. And you will recognize it's a challenge, but that challenge is exactly what goes in our brain when we're trying to learn something new and complex. So working memory over the last 5-10 years is becoming a very important factor in many things. For example, in mathematics for younger kids, in academic performance, and also in many things throughout life. So working memory is coming across a very important factor to try to enhance and try to protect. So the question is how? So the how also builds on is not one thing. For example, aerobic exercise, as I said, is important. It builds more neurons. Often those neurons go to the prefrontal cortex, which is also linked to working memory. So aerobic exercise is still a very important part of the equation. What is new is that there are some specific computer-based programs that train the specific neurons that support that capacity. So by making them fire at the same time, they become stronger. So there are 2 main protocols that are, over the last 5 years, got a lot of both scientific and just real world support. The main one is called COGMED, COGMED, and we talk about that one in the book because people seem to be pretty happy with that. We review the science. That one was acquired by Pearson, a big educational publisher, which I think is very interesting because it opens the way, maybe in a few years, for that intervention to be more widely available through schools, through psychologists. So the only problem with that protocol is that they only distribute that through a network of licensed psychologists and licensed clinicians. So it's a bit of an expensive protocol, but you should maybe, depends on what you are thinking, consult maybe some psychologist or some provider in your area. They have right now providers in most cities in the U.S. and see maybe if whatever they tell you, it convinces you. But it is a well-developed intervention precisely for working memory. The other way is a bit more do-it-yourself, but there is a protocol called N, like the letter N, dual back, that is available in several websites, often for free, that you can practice yourself, and is also a protocol that is used mostly in research environments to improve working memory, and it also has shown good results. The problem is that it's because it's not very commercialized in a nice way, so it is free, but it can feel very dry, very boring, sometimes too difficult. So it depends on what you are looking for. I would say either COGMED or N dual back can be good places to start without forgetting, again, physical exercise and other important factors. So let me just to finish the answer, because, for example, another paper, another study we saw a few months ago talked about how people, when they have high levels of stress, that reduced their working memory. Why? Because if you are consumed with all these thoughts and worries, then you have less free space, less free mental space for actually learning what is new. So you are misallocating your working memory from what you really have to pay attention to and work on to our internal worries. So stress management also can be part of the solution.
And before I let you go, I have not been able to, I know about CogMed, and I really can't afford that. I mean, it's quite expensive. The second item, I have down M as in Mary and then dash dual back, and I know that that's not correct.
Yeah. So it's close. It's N as in Nancy.
Oh, and okay, yes, go ahead.
Yes, and also CogMed, if you contact some local school, over the last 6 months, they have been running a lot of free trials through schools. So often more aimed at students, but perhaps you can get some friendly teacher who can give you a license as part of the trial to try it yourself. So you could also contact the school and see if somehow you can access it through them.
Well, that's a great idea. I'm 70, and I would have to find a very nice teacher, but I may be able to do that. Now, before I let you go, I've got the N, but dual back cannot be the name, the rest of the name.
No, it is because it's a pretty scientific task.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't have it's dual, like DUAL,
okay.
And task as in task, TASK. So that's because it's
dual task.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's N as in Nancy dash dual task.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. A special thanks to Alvaro, and we look forward to meeting everyone again next month. On October 16th, we have another teleseminar on your brain on yoga. And also, I want to remind everybody that we're happy to offer these programs at no cost. But if you feel satisfied and compelled to help the foundation, you can give a tax-free donation at alzheimersprevention.org. So, Alvaro, would you like to have a final word?
Yeah, two last ones, very quick. One, that donations are very good for your brain, if I may say that. And maybe it's part of socialization, of meaningful socialization, who we want to support and be with. And the other, also given the specific questions some people were asking me in the end. I mean, again, I'm biased, right? Because we prepared this book, but we really think that people should read the book to understand what is available and what makes sense before jumping on all the things that are available, because often we are missing big opportunities. So please go ahead and try, but please remember there is this resource to learn how the brain works, how we can learn new science and apply it, and how we can use all these products and lifestyle habits to our benefit. And nothing, frankly, from my perspective, can replace a book. So I hope many people can enjoy it.
Very good. I do too. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Alvaro, and have a good evening, everybody.
The pleasure has been mine. Thank you very much, Gertie and Dharma.
Thank you. We will be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.